I called police on my entitled son. Original post. For context, I, female 35, have a son that was born when I was married to my first husband. I was young when he was born, and his father was abusive to me. My ex-husband's mom was constantly in our lives, trying to take over and make my son hers. I left my ex when I was in my early 20s, and my ex-mother-in-law ended up taking my son into another state and filing for custody. She went into a state that has grandparents' rights as our stint. I fought her for years and ended up getting remarried to my current spouse, and we had a son together when I was in my mid-20s, a boy who is now 10. I see my oldest son only during the summer and holidays. I finally got a court case moved to our local court, and a judge said that I was wronged and ordered shared custody and visitation. My ex-mother-in-law made a huge deal that my son needed to stay with her during the week because of school, and the judge went with it so he could finish high school in an environment he was familiar with. My ex-mother-in-law has ruined my son, just like she did her own. She's given him any and everything he's wanted and asked for. She's taught him no respect and kept him very sheltered. She literally jumps on people if they don't give him his way. So in turn, my son is now loud, violent, and all around sad to be around. So, he came up to visit during Halloween and showed his awful character. My husband's mom lives with us, and she isn't well. She's doing chemo. She's been a big help with my youngest son, so that I could help my husband with our business. My youngest is a delight to be around. He's polite, funny, and respectful. And we've taught him that you don't expect anything unless you work for it. I went and picked my oldest up, and his attitude started right away, because his phone died and the charger I had in trunk didn't fit his phone. He wanted me to get off the interstate and buy him an overpriced one from a truck stop or something. I told him no, that I'd get him one when we got in town, and that next time, he needs to remember to bring one for the house and the car. I even suggested making a packing list ahead of time. Now, my youngest was in the back with his tablet playing quietly, and my oldest realized the tablet was plugged into a car charger. He asked his younger brother for the charger, and I told him it's an Apple charger. It won't work with your Android. My oldest said, "You don't know that. Shut up." Next thing I know, he's forcibly taken the Apple charger and is trying to fit it in his phone. And when it didn't work, he threw it into the back seat of the truck. My youngest just plugged his tablet back up without a word, but I told my oldest son that his behavior wasn't acceptable. Fast forward to the next day. Oldest son is still fuming at me because I made him wait, bad-mouthed me to his grandma, etc. I left to go to the office as did my husband, and my mother-in-law was going to take my youngest son to the tree trail for Halloween. She asked oldest son if he wanted to go, and he told her to kick rocks. My husband told oldest son not to speak to her like that. I knew trouble was brewing, I just didn't know how bad. Apparently, mother-in-law and youngest son went to the tree trail, and oldest son called mother-in-law to tell her he wanted Hardee's, also known as Carl Jr. My mother-in-law told him there was food at home and that it would be a while before she could get it, but oldest son told her she needed to bring it now. My mother-in-law told him to either eat what was at the house or wait. Oldest son cussed her and hung up on her. Mother-in-law called me, and I told her not to reward bad behavior. I told her we had plans to go out anyway later to eat. He could wait. So when mother-in-law gets home, she tries to open the door and her key won't work. Oldest son comes to the door and tells her that he's angry and doesn't want her in the house, so he locked her out. He told her to wait outside until he either felt like opening the door or until I came home. My mother-in-law told him to open the door ASAP. She called me crying and I went the heck off. I called oldest son and told him he didn't make the rules in my house. He went by them and that he would be punished if he didn't open the door. He really thought I was playing, but I left the office and went home. Cue disaster. I opened the door and oldest son was there on the other side. Mother-in-law and youngest son had been waiting in her car, and oldest son was blocking the door, saying he'd told mother-in-law to keep outside, that it was her punishment for telling him no. I told him to move, now. I tried to push past him, and he pushed me back outside, threatening to lock us all out. I went to go inside again, and he put his hand on my face and pushed me back out. I told him that's it, I'm calling the police. He didn't think I was serious, but I did it. I told the dispatcher that my oldest son was refusing to let me into my home and had put his hands on me. Oldest son goes into a rage, and I mean a pure rage. He comes out of the door screaming profanity and threats, tries to take my phone, and the lady tells me she'll send someone ASAP. I mean, I had to literally fight him to keep him from breaking my phone. Then he goes after my youngest son. He tells youngest son that he hates him and is going to end him because youngest son caused his life to be awful since he was born, and that oldest son should be the only one getting anything from me. Oldest son said he was my true son since he was born first and from my first marriage. I don't know. Ex-mother-in-law's BS. My mother-in-law locks youngest son in her car, and oldest son proceeds to kick, punch, and crack the windows and windshield in her car. Oldest son goes after mother-in-law just as my husband pulls up. He's telling mother-in-law this is her fault, that she just needed to do what he said. My husband tries to restrain oldest son, and oldest son is screaming he will have my husband arrested, etc. The police comes, and they immediately take over restraining oldest son and put him into the back of the car. My husband and I explained the situation, and I told the officer that my ex-mother-in-law had shared custody. So the officer calls ex-mother-in-law and tells her what's happening. He puts her on speaker, and she immediately puts the blame on us, saying we provoked him and are mistreating him. The officer told her that didn't seem to be the case, as a neighbor had come forward and said she had called 911 too, plus had a security camera that showed the entire thing. Ex-mother-in-law jumps to saying that the police here can't do anything with oldest son, as he's a resident of another state, blah blah blah. The cop tells ex-mother-in-law that's not the case, and it seems like oldest son needs to learn to control himself. The officer hangs up and ex-mother-in-law immediately calls me, so I put her on speakerphone. She's not the smartest yet thinks she is. Ex-mother-in-law said if I had oldest son arrested, that I would be a bad mom, and that he was justified in what he'd said and done. I asked her about the true son thing, and she said he was my only heir, as he was my first son and from my first marriage, and that divorce is a sin. I told her that's not how it works, and I told her I'm tired of him taking my home over and trying to hurt people. Long story short, he spent 3 days in juvenile lockup before a hearing, and the judge asked me what I wanted to do, so oldest son is being sent to a group home. My ex-mother-in-law fought the entire way, but had no hold, because both officers and my neighbor gave statements. Now, ex-mother-in-law is saying I'm ruining his life, and I'm a crappy parent. She's also accusing my husband of abuse towards oldest son. Now for the top comments before reading the updates. Holy crap. You did the right thing. Your son is a threat to everyone in your house, and his grandmother is doing him no favors. Get him the help he needs. Don't abandon him, but don't risk your family's safety. The heir phrase is making me worry. Sounds like ex-mother-in-law was hyping up Opie's death or inheritance that would go to oldest son. The mother-in-law will likely be dead by that time, but Opie would be smart not to give anything to the first son until he cleans up his act. You did the right thing. Absolutely. He sounds really dangerous. I think it's mainly the ex-mother-in-law that needs a serious punch. Children mirror in some sense the behavior of those around them. The ex-mother-in-law ruined a kid. What a horrible sadistic thing to do. I'm wondering if the kid hasn't turned his true rage on her. I'm sure that if the little POS went after her the way he did his mom's family, it would change her tune real quick. Those two deserve each other. Edit. Okay, so I've noticed a lot of comments saying I abandoned my son and gave him to his paternal grandma, etc. That is not the case. I live in a Commonwealth state with no grandparents' rights, and she had 25 plus years of residency in a state that does have them. When I left her son, my ex-husband, she became furious. In her home state, a grandparent has the right to intervene in a child's life during the parent's divorce, and she used that to her advantage. A judge in her home state granted her visitation with my son, even though he was born in my state. During a visit, she filed for custody and was granted it until the divorce was finalized. The divorce took over 2 years due to my ex not wanting to sign papers and being difficult. So, oldest son was almost 10 when it was finalized. I got something called a change of venue accepted, and a custody case was transferred to my local court when it should have been their entire time. Of course, ex-mother-in-law wasn't going to willingly hand him over, so she kept filing appeals, continuances, and other things to prolong the case. It eventually went from family court to circuit court, which is also known as high court for that judge to decide. By this time, oldest son was at the legal age where he could have a voice in court and was established at a school in ex-mother-in-law's area. The judge said oldest son could finish school there and then be transferred up here for school. My ex-husband had signed his parental rights over to his mom, and the judge had to take that into consideration. He did this to avoid the state going after him for child support. The local judge ordered ex-mother-in-law to do therapy as well as oldest son, and there were issues with them not complying. My ex-mother-in-law ruined her own son. He is in his 30s, won't work, doesn't drive, and expects her to keep him up. I did nothing wrong aside from leaving my abusive ex. The recent psych evaluation said oldest son lacks empathy for others and has delusions of grandeur or whatever it's called, meaning he thinks he's better than others. Ex-mother-in-law also had to do a session, and the therapist said ex-mother-in-law is similar in regards, and that her expectations aren't realistic, as they both have superiority complexes. My ex-mother-in-law used to lock me out of my own home because she wanted to punish me or limit my contact with my own son. When she took him, I did contact the local and state police, but they couldn't go into her state without the permission of officials there, and by then, she'd already filed paperwork. She had nothing to use against me, would not abide by court-set visitation, etc. I have 2 homes, a business, and I'm very self-sufficient. My family life is good, not dysfunctional, and we've done everything we can to incorporate my son into our family, but he's refused to accept. I'm sorry I'm a crappy mom for not allowing him to lock me out of my own damn house. Now for the first update. I had a meeting with his in-house therapist this morning, and the therapist and group home admin suggested sending him to a therapeutic foster home or a one-on-one psych unit, as he is just too much for them to try and rein in. He's made inappropriate and physical threats to female staff and just been defying everyone. Even though my ex-husband signed his rights over to his mom, the ex-mother-in-law, the GH staff tried contacting him and my ex, and his wife told them to never call again, that they don't want oldest son around their girls because he's been violent towards them in the past. The in-house said oldest son needs more help than she can give him, and he seems to undermine her because she is she. He has a true disrespect for women. I tried talking to him before I left, and he said again that if I didn't tell them I lied, then he would not speak to me. I told him, if that's what you want, but you aren't coming home. He said to me, in front of everyone, that he was coming home, and would all be punished for this when he did. I told him that's not going to happen. Then oldest son said if I took him home today, then my punishments might not be as severe. I told him he's not doing anything to me, and he said, we'll see which, and I walked away. The problem with the therapeutic home is nobody in our area is willing to take him due to how violent he is. If he goes to a psych ward, he will be locked down 23 hours a day. Oldest son is also trying to put this on my spouse, saying his stepfather is to blame, and if the courts would make my husband leave, the oldest son's behavior would change. This is not true. He's just trying to cause me more problems. I told him my spouse has had very limited interaction with my oldest son and has had no disciplinary action towards my oldest son. The GH gave me oldest son's phone, shoes, and other personal belongings. I went through the text on his to ex-mother-in-law after my husband did some sort of magic to unlock the phone. And oldest son's jokes with ex-mother-in-law about unaliving me, how he deserves to have my home to himself, and how his little brother is an abomination because youngest son's father is my second husband. Ex-mother-in-law is religious and doesn't believe in divorce. The phone is a prepaid phone, so I'm going to deactivate it and put it away in case I need it for evidence. I then texted ex-mother-in-law and told her I had his phone and would be keeping it and the text messages. She went nuclear-powered because she knows she's busted. She started saying things about my deceased father and trying to act like oldest son to deflect the blame. I can't wait to see what lies she comes up with now. I'll know in a few days what the plan is, whether they can find someone to take him or if he's going to a lockdown unit. The judge said he can't come back to my house because the courts fear for the safety of my younger child. CPS is also involved now, and a CPS worker asked if I'd be willing to sign oldest son over to the state completely, and I said absolutely not. Now for the second update. I spoke again with the GH and they suggested again my willingness to terminate my parental rights like my ex-husband did. The caseworker said she thought it was best because then they could get oldest son help without ex-mother-in-law interfering. The caseworker also told me that they'll have to investigate the allegations against my spouse, even though she knows they aren't true. I recorded a call. She said oldest son is the worst they've seen and needs intensive help. I've signed papers for him to get treatment, but my ex-mother-in-law also has a say and is refusing. They want her out of the picture. I'm not sure what to do. I know this could affect my youngest son. The caseworker even said that if this goes to court, that my ex-mother-in-law is planning on using my youngest son as her defense, saying I play favorites and provide more for youngest son. The caseworker says she understands the situation, but the judge probably won't. Ex-mother-in-law is also playing the card that my husband won't provide for oldest son. This is not correct, but my husband has never had any legal obligations to do so. My husband is livid, said he's tired of oldest son disrupting our home. He now says that oldest son is not welcome here and that I need to sign the papers. Now for the last update. So in reference to my previous post regarding the situation with my oldest son, it's only gotten worse. He was transferred to the group home the evening of the court date and refuses to speak to me unless I tell them all I lied and that I'm a bad mom. I refuse to do that. My ex-mother-in-law has fought to get him out, but the judge and the in-house therapist said that is danger to others, which leads me to this next situation. My mother-in-law came forward after he was arrested and told my husband and I that this wasn't the first time oldest son had hurled abuse at her. Apparently, during the summer, she's gotten him fast food to avoid a tantrum. That is, stolen her bank card to buy things online, slammed her hand in a door and verbally abused her. She had video proof because she was afraid he'd actually hurt her one day. My youngest son also said that oldest son had been mean to him, which leads me to the biggest problem we've had yet. Apparently, there was a situation in my ex-mother-in-law's estate that she didn't tell me about. Oldest son had been accused of assaulting a much younger female on his bus to and from school. My ex-mother-in-law usually takes him, and he said he was angry at ex-mother-in-law because he had to take the bus. So it's why he hurt the girl. All of this was known to ex-mother-in-law when she sent him up here on Halloween. Well, had me pick him up. She never said a word. The girl's parents contacted the police there, and an investigation is still in process. The in-house therapist asked my son about the situation, and he shows no remorse. Apparently, what happened was, he molested and potentially R-worded a girl of 12. He's 16 now. We won't know if he actually did it to her until the results came back, but I fully believe he did because the girl told him later she may be pregnant, and he threatened to cut her throat and end her. She recorded this because she was afraid that no one would believe her. I don't know if she's pregnant or not, but if she is, that's his conviction right there. I'm hurt, I'm disgusted and heartbroken. My ex-mother-in-law is blaming the girl, as is typical of ex-mother-in-law. My ex-mother-in-law even threatened the girl's parents when this came about and claimed it was consensual. The in-house therapist at a group home oldest son is at in my state said oldest son shows no remorse, called the girl names, and said she deserved it because she's worthless and there to take the brunt of his anger. His dad is like this as well. The judge says if oldest son is charged in ex-mother-in-law's estate, that it will likely be moved up here. My husband says I need to wash my hands off oldest son, that I haven't been his mom for a long time in his mind, and that he will have to face his consequences. I just can't believe this has happened. Your oldest son sounds like it's a matter of time until he severely injures, if not kills, someone. Likely you or youngest son or your mother-in-law. Jesus, he needs to be away from your ex-mother-in-law. Her track record speaks clearly for itself. She is vile. She absolutely is. When he was a baby, she'd take him and refuse to let me hold him or anything. She'd let me watch him, as she put it. She would get in the middle of any and everything we tried to do. I'm so sorry you're going through all of this. I hope you realize none of this is your fault. Your husband is right. You need to wash your hands off him. Hopefully the group home will be good for him. Good luck, Opie.